why this idea is so opposed by science today, because it would require revisiting all the foundational assumptions that we have about reality, about what is reality. Well, I was co-inventor of the microprocessor. I developed the fundamental technology that made the microprocessor possible, the silicon gate technology. My first company was Zilog. We developed and I invented the Z80 microprocessor, which is still in volume production today. The Z8 microcontroller, which is still in volume production today. We're talking about 1974, and the first products were introduced in 76 and 78. So then I started another company in the voice data workstations, and finally Synaptics, which worked on neural networks, and eventually developed the touch pads and the touch screens that now have changed the way we interface with our mobile devices. Possible to do. So we ended up developing products that we could build at that time. And that's how we invented the touchpad and the touch screen that have changed the way we interface with our mobile devices. And that company became highly successful. However, it was in that company that the unhappiness that I felt started to fester. And also in that company, I started asking myself, since I was studying neuroscience and biology, how come those books never speak about consciousness? They all talk about electrical signals, biochemical signals, and what have you, but consciousness is like a dirty word, was never mentioned. So I started asking myself, could I make a conscious computer? Based on the understanding that was prevalent in those days, and is still prevalent, that consciousness emerges from the brain, and the brain is like a computer. That's the sort of the classical wisdom. And the more I thought, the more impossible the task appeared. It was clear that there was no way that I could produce sensations and feelings, which is the way the consciousness allows us to have an experience, by converting electrical signals. How do you do that? Nobody knows. In fact, I realized that the idea that consciousness emerges from the brain because everybody knows that we are made of matter, and therefore is the only way that it can possibly come out, is simply a wrong idea. I worked very hard on myself, trying to understand the nature of consciousness. And it was this intensity of trying to understand, I believe, that attracted an experience that actually changed me forever. That experience was an awakening, where I experienced myself as the world that observes itself. That happened spontaneously. It was, it was such an unexpected experience that I would never have dreamed that it would be possible. In fact, I couldn't even imagine that it would be possible, because our ordinary experience is that we are separate from the world. So to experience yourself to be the world that observes itself is a mind twister, and in fact, people cannot understand. I would not have understood at that time what it means had I not experienced it. The only way to understand is to experience it. And that's in fact reveal the essential part of what consciousness is the capacity to know through an experience. an experience which is made of feelings, sensations, but brings those feelings and sensations are carriers of meaning. And we get the meaning. That's what knowing is, getting the meaning of something. So we get the meaning of who we are, the meaning of existence, the meaning of things, the meaning of how things work, and so on. So that was this happened 1990. And from that point on, I could never be the same. And then I understood that consciousness is not what is described to be. And I started exploring consciousness. And for 20 years, I studied consciousness on my own, living a double life, as they say, but not the way normally people understand double life. So still being a CEO of Synaptics, but also spending a fair amount of time working on myself, understanding what it means, and so on, studying it, but mostly experiencing. And it was through that process, at the end of that process, that I realized that consciousness cannot be produced by inert matter, by matter that does not have consciousness as a foundational aspect. Just like electricity and magnetism cannot be produced by atoms and molecules that don't have charge and spin, electrical charge and spin, as a foundational property, so is consciousness. So the idea that consciousness can emerge willy-nilly from something that doesn't have any is simply just a pretext to maintain the mindset that materialism has given us. The reception to this idea is, you must be crazy. How else can you expect? What else would you expect? I mean, it's, but of course I was crazy even in 1986 to study neural networks and thinking that that was the solution to the problems of artificial intelligence. And it took 25 years to actually realize that that was the actual solution. So I have a history of being crazy. So I like it. Consciousness is actually what makes us human. Machines don't have consciousness, and based on my studies, they will never have consciousness, because machines are not living systems. We are used to think that living systems are like machines, just like we are supposed to be machines. But in fact, they are not. Living systems are quantum systems, and in fact, there are few scientists now studying quantum biology because they have reached the conclusion that a living system that manipulates in its cells, manipulates one atom at a time, cannot be a classical system. And that's exactly what's going on. And now there is an awakening that life, which nobody understands what it is, by the way, is not a machine like a computer is. This equation, life equal machine like computer, is completely wrong. A living system is a system that is miraculous. No wonder why a living system is conscious. And that's why we need to study consciousness within living structures to start with, even though I believe that all matter is conscious, but not as particles. They are the quantum fields that are conscious. In fact, electrons, protons, and so on, the particles that were considered the foundation of physics, don't even exist as objects. They are not objects. This is another bad idea, that particles are particles and waves. That's what quantum physics is telling us. No, quantum field theory is telling us that particles are states of a field. And the field is everywhere. All the fields have space and time in common. And so those are the the ontology of our world is based on fields. Consciousness is a field. Once you accept the idea that consciousness might be fundamental, primary, an irreducible property of nature, then the very nature of reality has to come into question. Because the nature of reality that physics is telling us is based on matter, inert matter without consciousness. So everything that consciousness does comes later. But if it is there from the beginning, what is it doing at the very beginning of the universe? You see, you cannot, and that's why this idea is so opposed by science today, because it would require revisiting all the foundational assumptions that we have about reality, about what is reality. And that's why I've been, for the last 10 years, thinking carefully about what kind of reality is this reality. And of course, we think, and we have thought until relatively recently, that this is real, that this world that we live into is real. And if it wasn't because of computers that have shown that we can build virtual realities, and we can inhabit our consciousness, a piece of it can inhabit a character inside the virtual reality which exists in a computer, we would have never thought possible, that could be the same for this reality, that we think it is the only reality. That's why this idea is so opposed by science today, because it would require revisiting all the foundational assumptions that we have about reality, about what is reality. Give a gift from you, SPX. It's love, no SPX.